Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the last ayah, we learnt that the Yahud made the claim that they will be in the fire of Jahannam for a limited number of days, and that Allah Jalla wa Ala refutes this claim of theirs by asking them, do they have some type of contract with Allah, or are they speaking lies? So continuing on from that ayah, we have ayah number 81. Bala man kasaba sayyi'atan وأحاطت به خطيئته فأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. Nay, whoever earns evil and his sin has surrounded him, and they are the dwellers of the fire, they will dwell therein forever. Okay, so some keywords. Bala normally means yes when the question is asked in the negative context, but in this particular ayah it means bal, meaning nay. That is to say, no, the matter is not how you have described it in the previous ayah. Meaning, it will not be that the Yahud will be in the fire of hell for a limited number of days. This is not true. As for the verb kasaba, means to earn something through your works. As for the word sayyi'ah, this means an evil deed. The Mufassirun say what is referred to here is kufr. Whoever earns kufr, meaning works actions of kufr, and his khati'ah surround him. Khati'ah means sins, so it's the same as sayyi'ah. Ashab, companions, they are the companions of Jahannam because they will always stick with Jahannam, never leaving it, just like your companion sticks by your side. Khalidun means here forever. Sometimes Khalidun can mean a very long stretch of time, depending on the context, but in the context of the kuffar it means forever. Ayah number 82. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. And those who have Iman and work righteousness, then they are the companions of Jannah, dwelling therein forever. So in this ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala speaks about the polar opposite, the mu'minun, who have Iman and work righteousness. We have discussed what Iman means. As for working salihat, which is righteousness, then this is from Iman, but it has a special separate mentioning because of its importance. Otherwise it should be known that your actions are from your Iman, and that Iman increases and decreases, so that the more righteous actions you perform, the more your Iman increases. The more evil you commit, the more your Iman decreases. So your actions have an effect on your Iman because your actions are part of your Iman. As for working righteousness, then what is an act of righteousness? We say that an act of righteousness has two essential ingredients. Number one, it is done for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala, not for the sake of other people, or maybe to impress other people, or for wealth or honor and prestige. No, none of that. And secondly, if it's an act of ibadah, it is done in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet, as opposed to these bid'i types of acts of ibadah, which is what the Sufiya are known for. As for the kuffar performing righteous deeds like giving charity and helping others and so on, then they are indeed rewarded, but only in this life, not in the hereafter. So it's a limited type of reward. Okay, so let's reflect on these two ayatan. We may take that if your sins surround you, then you're definitely heading for Jahannam forever. And this would apply to the kuffar, because on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the kuffar will have nothing other than sins surrounding them. They will have no good deeds, as we find that their good deeds will be turned into dust or scattered particles, as Allah Jalla wa Ala teaches us in other parts of the Quran. As for the Muslim, then even if he has evil deeds, at least his evil deeds do not surround him, because he will have good deeds with which he could be saved. We find in these two ayat that Allah Jalla wa Ala balances the matter out. He speaks about the kuffar, then he speaks about the Muslimin. So he maintains balance, and this balance is maintained throughout the Quran, such that Jannah and Jahannam and the kuffar and Muslimin are mentioned about the same. So the Quran is a book of targhib and tarhib. It frightens you away from evil and it encourages you to do that which is good. It maintains balance, and that's how the Muslim is balanced. We take the belief in Jannah and Jahannam. This is a belief, of course, in our Aqidah. We also learn that the dwellers of Jahannam from the kuffar will dwell therein forever, and the inhabitants of Jannah from the Muslimin will dwell therein forever. And if one is not convinced that Khalidin means forever, without end, then we have other ayat in the Quran which speak about Khalidina fiha abada, dwelling therein. Abada means without end. So other ayat are even more explicit on this matter. Let's take ayah number 83. وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And when we took a covenant from the children of Israel, saying, worship none but Allah alone, and be dutiful and good to your parents, and to the near kindred, and to the orphans, and to the poor people, and speak good to people, and perform your salah, and give the zakah. Then you turned away, except a few of you, while you were averse. Okay, so some vocabulary. Mithaq means a covenant. It comes from the verb wathiqa yathiqu, to trust someone, because when you take a covenant with someone, you are trusting them. So the covenant is with the Banu Israel. We have said what Banu Israel means. La ta'budu, ibadah linguistically means to be lowly and humble. They often used to say tariqun mu'abbad, this pathway is mu'abbad, meaning lowly and flat and easy to traverse. And ibadah in the Shar'i sense means to be lowly and humble in obedience to Allah Jalla wa Ala with love and veneration. So understood in this way, it is impossible for the kuffar to perform acts of ibadah. Why is that? Because they are not doing it for Allah Jalla wa Ala. So if an atheist does some good action, this is not called ibadah. Sure, it's a good action, and he can be rewarded for it in this life, but we do not call it ibadah. Ibadah has to be directed to Allah Jalla wa Ala. And walidaini, walid is a parent, walidain, two parents, so that's mother and father. Ihsana, doing good to them. So this is with regards to your speech, speaking good to them, and your fi'l, your services to them. And with regards to your heart as well, not harboring any hatred or animosity to them. And also doing good to the dhil qurba, these are your near kindred. So those people who are related to you by blood. And there's no limit to this, it's just anyone related to you by blood, you do good to them. And the closer they are to you in relation, the more emphasized it is for you to do good to them. And doing good to them is largely determined by the customs, as long as the customs do not contradict anything in the text. And to the yatama, the plural of yatim, it comes from yutum, which means infirad, which means to be alone or by yourself. So this is a child who does not have a father, because a father is normally the breadwinner. And the yatim is only a yatim when he's below the age of adolescence and he does not have a father. They could be a male or a female. And speak husna to people, that is goodly speech. So that includes all types of good speech, not using vulgar language and being polite. And to make iqamah of the salah, we have spoken about iqamah of the salah. And to give the zakah, this is a key term. Zakah in the language means to increase, and it can also mean to be pure. And technically it is to give a certain portion of certain wealth of yours to certain people at a certain time as an act of devotion to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Also the word miskin is used. It comes from sakana, which means to be tranquil and still, as opposed to active, because the miskin are such people that their poverty has made them still and tranquil. When you are rich and well fed, you are active, but when you are poor and not well fed, you are still. He says, ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ, then you backslid or turned away, meaning turned away from this teaching and from the contract, except a few amongst you. So there were a few people who maintained their integrity to Allah and His messengers. وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. Now mu'rid also means to turn away, but in this context we would understand it to mean that you turned away in your heart, so you were averse to the teachings and the orders of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. We find Allah Jalla wa Ala says, we took a covenant, so He's referring to Himself in the plural, and this is the royal we. Even kings and queens speak about themselves in such manner, and there is nothing wrong with that. It does not mean you are a plural number, it's just a royal we for ta'zim. We find in this ayah there are 8 commands that Banu Israel are enjoined with, all pertaining to different categories. He begins with the most important first, which is the ibadah of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and then the second most important, which is to do good to your parents. And this is because after Allah Jalla wa Ala, your parents are your biggest benefactors, so you owe them the greatest debt of gratitude. And ihsan is a proactive word. You go out of your way to do good for them. So you actually make a positive effort, rather than just sitting back and not doing any harm to them. This is not ihsan. We also find the obligation of doing ihsan to the near kindred, to the orphans, and to the poor people. And this is all an obligation because it is a mithaq. It is a contract, and a contract is not a recommendation. Contract is an obligation. Notice he's speaking about the Banu Israel in the bygone era. So what applies to them also applies to us. And this is a general rule, unless we have evidence to the contrary. We find the obligation of speaking properly to people, so that is, using the best of words in the best of ways. So the style of speech matters. And certainly not to use any vulgar language, because a vulgar language comes from a vulgar heart. We find that the salah and zakah are mentioned together, and this happens much in the Quran, because they are the most important acts of ibadah after the shahada. And that these 2 acts were also enjoined on Banu Israel from the bygone era. So these 2 acts are nothing new. We also notice how he says, ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ, then you turned away. So now Allah is addressing the Yahud of the Prophet's time. And yet the contract was for the Yahud of the bygone era, during the time of Musa a.s. and other prophets of the Banu Israel. So why does he now address the Yahud of the Prophet's time? It's because all these Yahud are one and the same people. So he's treating them as one community. And they are mu'ridun, meaning in their hearts they were averse. So not only did they not keep the contract, but they were actually averse to the contract. So it is upon us to check our hearts. If we find ourselves feeling averse to the orders and prohibitions of Allah Jalla wa Ala, then there is something wrong, and we need to make dua to Allah Jalla wa Ala to soften our hearts. Finally, we may take the justice of Allah Jalla wa Ala when He says that you people turned away. He does give a caveat and say that a few of you did not turn away. So it was not all of you. This is important. Even though there were only a few, they deserve a mention, because this is from justice and being fair. Wallahu a'lam.